Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being with us live today. My name is Serna. I'm the Digital Communications Manager at Vizcaya. I'm the little disembodied logo that you see on the screen. And I'll be here on the back end, just kind of managing the live stream and answering comments as you guys post them. Today we are live with David Miller, Vizcaya's Collections Care Technician, and Kevin Wynn, the Public Programs Coordinator at Lynn and Louis Wolfson, the second Florida Moving Archive, Image Archive. I almost had it.
You almost got through it.
College.
80%. That's very good for a beginner.
That's a B, right? Okay.
Oh,
I'll take it.
High B.
Okay.
85.
I'll take it. So in honor of Miami's 125th anniversary, which is actually today, we're going to go back in time a little bit and see some different moments in Vizcaya's history with footage provided by the Wolfson Archive. So before we get started, Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Wolfson Archives and what you do there?
Okay, the Lynn and Louis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives at Miami-Dade College is an archive that is part of the Miami-Dade College Archives. It was established in 1984 as kind of a freestanding organization that was actually supported by 3 different academic institutions. And it was started in this 1984 because WTVJ, the first TV station in Florida and the first TV station in Miami, therefore, which started broadcasting in 1949, had started covering news in about 1950 with a new graduate from the University of Miami named Ralph Rennick, whose name may be familiar to some of our long-timers who are listening or hearing this. And they started covering the news in the early 1950s. They started using film in the early 1950s, and they saved the vast majority of the film that they used to cover the news in beginning of the 1950s. And they continued into the early 1980s when the station was sold. So if you imagine like a daily newspaper for 35 years of South Florida's history during a time of its most intense development, the period after World War II into the 1980s, and you imagine the kind of breadth and depth of coverage you would get, this is very similar to that, but it's on film and video. So there are big stories, big local stories, big state stories, big international stories. There are little tiny local stories that don't show up anywhere else in this archive. And also there are lots of silly publicity stunts, one of which we may see a little bit later. But it's just an amazing chronicle of the history that's going on. And it's on film and television. It's not you read it in a book. So we're very happy to maintain it. Behind me, you see some boxes that are in our collection that came to us. We've recently removed some materials from an off-site storage facility and brought them back to our facility on the campus, Wolfson campus of Miami-Dade College. So that's my very exciting background. And we're just happy to be able to present this footage for people, and also to make it available for filmmakers, the raconteur boys, the guys who brought you the U, and Cocaine Cowboys and their documentaries have a new documentary coming out early in August, which uses some of our footage. The recent PBS documentary on Hemingway used some of our footage. Lots and lots of documentaries use lots and lots of our footage. And also Miami-Dade College media students can use our footage. So it's available to the public. It's free to view online. We're digitizing everything eventually. And we'll get back at the end of the show and say where you can see that.
Perfect. We actually had a lot of fun watching a lot of this footage. So I'm going to turn it over to David now to tell us a little bit about Vizcaya and kick off the presentation.
Hey guys, my name's David Miller. I'm the Collections Care Technician here at Vizcaya Museum and Garden. So as many of you know, Vizcaya was built in 1916 as the winter home of the wealthy businessman James Deering. Now, James Deering and his artistic director, Paul Chalfin, traveled sort of across Europe to collect both objects and inspiration to sort of build this pseudo-European villa right on the edge of the water here in Miami. They also had the help of the architect F. Burrell Hoffman and the landscape architect Diego Suarez, who was responsible for our very impressive formal gardens outside. Now, as I mentioned, Vizcaya was originally a private home of one man, but in 1953 it was turned into a museum. But before we talk about that, we could take a look at some sort of archival film footage and archival photos of what Vizcaya was like back in the early 1900s. So this is digitized film footage of the entrance of Vizcaya. Now, this was not the original location of South Miami Avenue, but James Deering was able to sort of use some of his influence to get that road put closer to the entrance of Vizcaya. You can clearly tell this is a very different South Miami Avenue than the one that we have today. The cars of this era would not have been able to speed down that road as they do today. And then this image that you're looking at here, it appears to be the driveway down to the main house of Vizcaya at that time. So some great sort of older footage showing us what the area was looking like at the time.
And this is a home movie. In addition to the news film that was the beginning of our collection, we also started collecting home movies. And this is, as far as we know, an amateur movie shot of this area, probably by a visitor or maybe a local, because Vizcaya was a very exciting project when it was brought about. This is probably dates from the mid-1920s, just before the tail end of the land boom.
And so, as I mentioned earlier, Vizcaya opened as a museum in 1953. But James Deering, the owner, died in 1925. So there was some time in between there in which Deering's nieces, Barbara and Marion, had to sort of do a lot of work. And they actually, they brought back Paul Chalfin to help repair Vizcaya after a hurricane in the 30s, I guess, to help repair it in sort of its original artistic image. And now he changed very few things, but one of the things that he did change coming back in the 30s was that he switched the chandeliers in the music room and the reception room. I guess he felt that each chandelier fit better in the other room. And knowing his history of sort of butting heads with Deering, maybe that was something that he actually had to wait until Deering was gone to make that change, and took the opportunity when he could. But so here we have some footage of the opening day at Vizcaya, and we're going to hear the director talking a little bit.
Actually, sorry guys, it looks like I didn't share audio when I did my screen share. I'm going to remove
Oh,
that.
that's all right.
And I'm going to remove this and share it again with sound this time. There
Excellent.
we go.
The first person you'll hear in this clip is I.D. McVicker, who is the chairman of the county commission. Here he is shaking hands with Director Taylor.
First customers in, so that we can welcome them to the County Art Museum. It is now my pleasure to present to you Mr. Robert Tyler Davis, Director of the Dade County Art Museum, who will tell you something of the details. Mr. Davis.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're very glad to have you here. Each one of you, as you come in, has been handed a guidebook to Vizcaya, and you're on your own from now on, moving along to the great stairway with fountains that shoot jets of water up into basins, and then the water falls back again, stairways on either side, more clipped hedges, until finally we come and see in the distance the casino, which is a charming, very light, gay little building, built in contrast to the house, which is quite massive. This is very light and open. One looks right through it, out onto the lagoon beyond. The whole mound, of course, is an artificial hill and gives a kind of variety in the garden with the great live oaks growing on top of it. Then we swing over to the right and we find another vista. There are three of them as we stand in the upstairs dining room window and look out. This time the paths shooting right in front of us, the white sand between the green clipped hedges becomes more clear, the design of the patterns.
So I love the part where the new director, Robert Tyler Davis, just says, "You're on your own. Have at it, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great time." I have an artifact. Oh, please go ahead.
No, go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I have an archival artifact from this. This is the television newscast script from March 11th, 1953. This is the page that was accompanying that footage. So this is the copy they would have read explaining the people who were standing there. This is the time for the segment. And this here, SOF, means sound on film, which would have been the transition to the footage you saw where the county commission head and the director were talking. So this is from 1953. This is an almost 70-year-old page of original TV news. And this is a great thing. We've recently brought them back from external storage, and it's a great thing to have because it fills in other details that we might not have in the original description of the film. One thing is that they had 977 visitors on Vizcaya's first day, which I understand today is a typical attendance is kind of that's kind of a slight disappointment of a day, but it was pretty exciting for 1953, I guess.
Another interesting fact about opening day is that at that time, admissions to just see the gardens was $1, and then you paid an additional $1.23 to enter the main house.
Wow.
So certainly different prices than we have today, but of course, a lot of things have changed. So Vizcaya's opening as a museum was sort of the beginning of a long tradition of community engagement at Vizcaya. Obviously we're a place that both locals and tourists can come and visit and enjoy. So some of the footage that we're going to take a look at next is going to be about the sort of different events in which the community was able to engage with Vizcaya.
So this footage is the casino, the gay little building at the end of the waterway. And this is a fashion shoot which took place in February 1953 when the water might have been a little bit cold. But it's for a summer line of leisure wear by the Italian designer Emilio Pucci. Now this dress is described as a green dress with a fringe of straw. So I don't know if that made it through the season in 1958, which is when this was done. 1955, pardon me. Lots of fashion shoots at Vizcaya. If you go to the Florida State Archives site, Florida Memory, and look through photos for fashion, you'll find a lot of fashion shoots done at Vizcaya. This not only was a local community event, but it also was something that boosted Vizcaya's image around the world. The people saw this kind of thing, saw still photos more than this news footage to broadcast locally, saw this thing all over the world, and this would have made Vizcaya's brand even bigger. This is supposed to be a mink print dress that's supposed to look like mink, but it's a print, and I'm not sure it works. So this is an actual community event, or a preview of one. This is just before Easter. They had an event for Easter called the Easter Walk at Vizcaya, and this is the Robert Edwards family, Mrs. Edwards and the children, dressed in their Easter finery, enjoying the beautiful gardens of historic Vizcaya, as the original news script says. Lots of cutaways to the statuary and things like that. The Easter was a thing that was done very seriously in the 1950s. Those people are dolled up. Also dressed up.
Really quick. I actually have a question for the people here live with us. We have some like 40 people live with us, which is great.
My.
So if you guys have ever seen Vizcaya in an advertisement, sometimes on social media we get messages from people saying, "Hey, is this you guys? Is this Vizcaya?" If you have ever seen Vizcaya and what you think is an advertisement and we're in the background, let us know in the comments. We're always curious to know kind of what's out there and what you guys have spotted.
And looking at these images and images of people dressed up, it's hard not to think about the the photo shoots that people come and take at Vizcaya today. And this event here, this Little Ladies Day, was an event where little children would come and dressed up in different outfits, and it reminds us, of course, of the sort of children's and educational events that we have today at the museum as well.
Yeah, this was called Little Ladies Day, and it started in the early 60s and ran just about through the 1970s, more or less annually. And it seems to involve like costume party, costume contests with different age ranges, a little baton twirling to break up the fashion there. Some of these get-ups are interesting. The young ladies in Young Ladies Day are really taking the event pretty seriously, but the young gentlemen we saw before in these kind of weird paper pirate hats and penciled on mustaches, I'm not sure they quite entered into the spirit of the event. But this is like, Jacqueline Kennedy, eat your heart out here.
But sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that, of course, Vizcaya is a very popular location for quinceañera photo shoots, and there's weddings that happen here, and all different sorts of special events for people. So you can see that that's part of a long tradition of the community sort of making use of Vizcaya as a resource, and what a beautiful and historical place that it is.
Yeah, and before we go to this next clip exactly, I want to say we looked for a quince shoot, because it's like, this is the iconic, more recent thing that happens in Vizcaya, right? And we just couldn't find one. That doesn't mean we don't have one lying somewhere, but during the time period when those became really popular, the time when our donations kind of got a little bit less regular, it wasn't like they could donate a big 40-year batch of film to us. So we may yet find one. We also have promotional films, so we may yet find one, and if we do, we will send up a flare. But this is another home movie, this footage here at the Bayfront facade of Vizcaya. And this involves a woman named Connie Gordon. Connie Gordon was named the most prolific art creative motivator by the Guinness Book of World Records. She was an artist, a painter, and an art instructor. And she became very famous throughout the United States and the world, actually. She was on television a lot once she got back from her service in the United States Marine Corps in World War II. Fascinating life. This is Connie back here kind of behind the easel holding up this bit of painting she's demonstrating for people. She's one of these people before Bob Ross, kind of like, well, you draw a line in blue here, and then you put a little yellow on it. Oh, look, it's a tree. This was kind of Connie Gordon's forte. But you notice this big crowd she's got at Vizcaya. They're having like this mass painting party and instructional event. She did this a lot. She also did this on television. She appeared on her own local shows, and she appeared on national talk shows all the time. A long-running television personality. That's her. We'll get a better angle on her shortly. But she started in television in 1948, which is about as early as you can. So there she is, demonstrating. She had incredible joie de vivre. We hosted a paint-in with Connie Gordon when she was about 92 years old, and it was a good thing that we were able to keep up with her. So there were there was also a regular event at Vizcaya, which is different, called Artists' Day, where people could come in and paint and create art based on what they saw at Vizcaya. I don't know if anything like that continues today, David, or if they...
Yeah, actually, it's something that you just kind of see on the grounds of Vizcaya pretty frequently, as people either sketching or maybe doing some watercolor painting out in the gardens, because of course, it's a good place to sort of get artistic inspiration. Also, pretty frequently we see art classes from FIU that come and walk through the main house and just take a look at all the different artistic styles that are represented, because, in one room you'll have some neoclassical stuff. In another room, you'll get some, sort of more Napoleon-esque stuff. So it's a great place to take a look at different kinds of art styles.
Because the whole idea with Vizcaya was that it was a mansion that was built over a period of, not in like a matter of years, which it actually was, but it was built over a matter of like, I guess they were going after a century or two. So one wing of it's supposed to evoke the style of a particular era, and then it moves on to the style of something else, from like
of course,
late Renaissance to like early 19th century or something. So they're a whole agglomeration of styles there.
Exactly. You'll have a room that is more in a Renaissance style, and then another room that reminds you of the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, with marble pillars and symmetry and things like that.
So this next story, which we're going to roll, is 1976.
Airport 1975 have given birth to Airport 1977. This latest endeavor is being billed as one of the most elaborate aviation films in movie history, and stars James Stewart as a multi-millionaire art collector. Naturally, a man of this stature needs an estate as a setting for his wealth, thus Vizcaya. The film is almost completely in the can, and these few days of shooting in Miami will be the last. Here you see Stewart and director Jerry Jameson discussing the opening scene of the film, which has Stewart arriving at his mansion in his private company helicopter. He also owns his own 747 jet, which is en route to his home. This giant plane is full of priceless art treasures and personal friends, but add some hijackers and the Bermuda Triangle, and you have Airport 77.
Yes.
It's got the name disaster film. I don't know where that came from. I'd rather just call it an exciting adventure film.
And have you enjoyed your stay here in Miami?
Yes, very much.
Have you ever thought about retiring?
Yes, I thought about it. Then I've taken a nap, and when I got up, I found that I didn't want to retire.
While Airport 77 represents another major motion picture shot in part in Miami, it means a big boost dollar-wise for the local economy, as many of the
Yeah, that wouldn't be allowed today.
are local residents. Joan Hall, Channel 4 News.
Yeah, the main reason we showed this clip with the helicopter actually landing in the gardens of Vizcaya and really close to the house.
Yeah.
Not like way out in the at the end of it is to make David go, what? No, stop. So that's Airport 77, sequel to the original Airport. It sounds like the hokiest, cheesiest thing in the world. We showed it a couple of years ago, and it is a pretty hokey, cheesy thing, but it's actually somehow its cumulative effect is pretty exciting as an action film. So it's one of an increasing number of feature films that were shot on location in Vizcaya. I have a brief list here. Before that, Tony Rome with Frank Sinatra was briefly shot there at the exteriors in 1967. Also filmed The Champ, which is a very big movie with John Voight and Ricky Schroeder, 1979. Absence of Malice with Paul Newman. 1982, The Fury of the Karate Experts, which stars no one I've ever heard of before.
I've never heard of that movie.
we've got to have a screening. People can come dressed in their gis. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, Bad Boys 2. This is another thing that is putting Vizcaya's image before the public all over the world. So it's once again building this hometown landmark, a familiar place to Miamians, into a place that's kind of becoming iconic around the world. And it's not too surprising there if somebody like Queen Elizabeth II or all the heads of states of Latin America show up at Vizcaya doing some big event.
Right. Yeah, and I believe that the tradition of filming at Vizcaya, filming different movies, actually dates back even to the silent film era. So there's lots of different movies that have been filmed there. If you guys want to throw a couple that haven't been named into the chat and let us know which ones you've seen Vizcaya in. But as Kevin just mentioned, Vizcaya was a cultural hub, and lots of different movie stars and things like that happened there. But it was also the site of a lot of important moments in history where, as he mentioned, different heads of state and things like that. So right now we're going to take a look at some footage of actually Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II walking through the gardens at Vizcaya. One can imagine the sort of things that they discussed. A statement from President Reagan says that they discussed the practical aspects of the ideals that they share: peace, justice, and the expansion of freedom. It seems like a bit of an overcast day in Vizcaya's gardens during this walk, but it seems pleasant enough anyway.
This is probably pool footage where one camera is shooting or a couple of cameras are shooting for journalists in general, because there are dissolves included in this sequence that they wouldn't be getting if it wasn't being sent through a control board. The thing that I find most interesting is at the beginning of this footage where they're coming down the steps and there are all these people around them. And you notice how all these security people and their entourages just kind of melt off to the side, and the Pope and President Reagan are like allowed to have alone time as they walk through the gardens.
Right.
It does look overcast.
Now, this footage shows them walking in the gardens, but they, of course, spent some time in the main house as well. And if you were to visit Vizcaya and to go into the living room, there are two red and yellow chairs kind of in the center of the room, and the Pope and President Reagan actually sat in those chairs and discussed some of the things that they discussed there. So I always think that that's a little cool that you had a sitting president and a Pope in that room in those chairs there. It's another interesting piece of history that you can sort of be a part of at Vizcaya.
So our next piece of footage is going to jump forward to 1991. Are we ready to? You want to say anything else, David?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, 1991.
Almost a half hour ahead of schedule.
Queen Elizabeth II came to Vizcaya. The Pope got overcast. The Queen of Great Britain got rain. If you drill that, please.
And the time she spent here at Vizcaya was less than half an hour. But in that time, she packed an awful lot of touring and an awful lot of conversation into it. Now, the gifts that she was given were not formally given
except from the children that you see here from the Miami Children's Hospital. Two of the miracle children, Kristen Shriver and Ryan Zergott, gave her and Prince Philip 5 Miami Children's Hospital wristwatches that she will then take back to her 5 grandchildren. She also received a basket of fruit, some photographs, posters, xerographs, and some paintings. Unfortunately, the formal presentation that was to have taken place out here on the terrace was cut short because of what you just saw, rain.
So these are preparations for the Summit of the Americas. One thing I want to note about the Queen Elizabeth footage, that is an air check. That is a recording made as the live broadcast goes out. You would think that we have recordings of everything they ever did, when in fact air checks are among the rarest items in our collections. Frequently they would do air checks of, say, the evening news, but they would do it over and over and over again, and they would have a tape for Tuesday and a tape for Wednesday, and so they would record it over and over again. So we might get the tape when it's at the end of its useful life and it has one air check, but it doesn't have these dozens and dozens. They just didn't have the wherewithal to collect all that stuff on the videotape and keep it. So air checks are really quite unusual, but they do have supers and IDs and information that we don't have in cut stories, like what we're about to see now, which fast forward to 1994 to the Summit of the Americas, which was the head of state of all the American democracies getting together at Vizcaya. And these are preparations taking place, including the building of the summit table in the courtyard of Vizcaya, which is a great big table that just about takes up the whole courtyard of Vizcaya. They managed to squeeze in the dignitaries here. And this is the heads of state of the different countries. This is probably, there's Jean-Claude Aristide, who may be coming back in the news there in the background of this shot anytime. The heads of state of all the democracies of the Americas. Cuba was not there because it's not a democracy. And they met to discuss trade, defense, crime, drug trafficking, cultural issues, a whole raft of issues.
You can imagine that even for Vizcaya, this is sort of a very high caliber event to have taken place there. So there were a lot of sort of different adjustments that we had to make, including catering to these very important delegates to their specific needs. One of these kind of led to a funny story where one of the delegates from one of the Latin American countries was quite old, and he needed to take a nap at some point in the middle of the day, and we actually had to get him set up in one of the decorated spaces in one of the historical rooms to take a nap in one of the historical beds. So again, probably not the kind of thing that we would have happen today, but lots of interesting things like that have happened throughout Vizcaya's history.
So here's the some of the photographers haggling, getting each other's way as they're trying to shoot the event. In some of these shots, you can see these kind of squarish pillars. There's one right at the middle of the screen, top middle of the screen now. These are the supports for the clear roof that was built over the courtyard of Vizcaya, I think in the late 1980s.
Yes, in the mid to late 1980s, the house was sort of closed off from the environment because originally it was built with an open air courtyard, and then each of the loggias on either side were open to the elements as well. In the mid 80s, they wanted to put an AC and sort of protect the house from, all that nasty floor and humidity and things like that. So those pillars are from the original sort of atrium roof that was placed over the courtyard of Vizcaya. I believe it's been replaced since then with a bit more of a, modern one.
Yeah, because the humidity and the heat were really playing havoc with the collections. I can say more or less as an archivist, someone who works at an archive, Florida heat and humidity are bad, bad, bad for anything that has any age on it at all. If you want to keep your whole movies that happen to be on film or video or anything, don't put them in the shed in the backyard garden, because 2 years later they will come back sopping and moldy and useless. And that's probably true of paintings and all kinds of other things. Yeah,
the Florida climate is definitely kryptonite to many of the things that we have at Vizcaya, which is why obviously taking care of it is one of our top priority jobs. In addition to just the regular climate and humidity, we also have to deal with hurricanes and storms and things like that. I believe we have some footage of post-Hurricane Andrew, which was pretty devastating to Vizcaya in terms of the gardens and the surroundings of the estate. But luckily, the inside of the house was mostly unscathed after that storm.
Hurricane that has ever hit South Florida. At this time, the world-renowned landmark took some devastating punches from Hurricane Andrew. Punches that literally knocked out the decorations and some irreplaceable statue at Vizcaya Gardens and Museum, leaving a cleanup guesstimate of more than $3 million.
The statue you were filming on the East Terrace, we're not going to try to replace that, but however, to actually piece that together is what we're going to do.
The back gardens where the popular Christmas party is held looks fine from a wide shot. Close up, the manicured lawn looks more like a swamp. And off to the side, an unwelcome visitor sits stranded against the building. Wing of Vizcaya,
yeah, seeing that boat there reminds me of the post-Hurricane Irma cleanup in 2017 when we actually had a jet ski that washed up into the garden. So unfortunately, this is not the first time that something like that has happened after a hurricane here.
Well, when you're near the bay, as Vizcaya is, on the bay, you know, storm surge is going to likely bring unwelcome visitors.
James Deering was certainly tempting fate building the house right there. So
he just didn't think about the future very much. All the open archways and loggias and the courtyard that was open, and it was just, you know, well, whatever.
Well, it was probably an amazing 10 years that he spent there with the house at its, you know, full force like that. So
yeah. So I think that's everything from the Wolfson archives that we have going yet. But
I think that's all the footage we have today.
All right.
So we actually have one more story that we kind of skipped from our Deputy Director of Collections and Curatorial. He was on staff when we had a visit from President Bush. So we recorded this little story of him getting basically locked out of his office by the Secret Service. So we're going to play that real quick.
I'm going to tell you a little story which, looking back, it's kind of funny, but at the time it was sort of frustrating and annoying. So this happened quite a few years ago, 2015 or so. There was a facility rental, and this was some kind of like a business conference or something. And one of the guests was former President Bush. And the conference part or a round table or so was happening actually in this space in the enclosed loggia. And they put wall-to-wall solid carpeting and this big round table here. Late afternoon, I was called down from my office upstairs to check if they could put some cable cameras. So I came down and we looked at it and you know, made some changes. Everything was done. And then I wanted to go back to my office upstairs. So I go to the hall there and I want to go up the stairs, and there's this man in a suit standing in front of the stairs. And he wouldn't let me go up. And I said, well, you know, my office is upstairs, and I just need to get my bag and my keys in so I can go home. Well, almost immediately I realized that I better not argue with this person, because the next thing you know, you'll see him wrestling me down onto the floor. The thing is that prior to this event, some people, their backgrounds had been fully checked. They could be on site and move around during the event while Bush would be on site. And they had gotten some kind of a pin that would identify them as having received clearance. I didn't, because I figured I wouldn't have to be on site. I couldn't even walk around the entire house. So I ended up being on the North Terrace where the cafe is, which is, you know, 2 floors up is where my office is. And Adrian Kaiser went up to my office.
So that is it for all of the footage that we have. So we had asked a few questions during the stream. We asked about advertisements. We asked about movies that were filmed at Vizcaya, if you guys know any. If you go ahead and leave those comments in the comments, that's obvious. We'll go back through at the end of the live stream, and we'll select a couple of people from those responses to get free admission at Vizcaya for this weekend. So we also wanted to say just thank you to Kevin and David for being here with us. If you guys want to continue exploring Miami history, you can do so online through the Wolfson archives on their website. I'm going to put that on the screen for you guys now. And of course, you can also visit Vizcaya, and you can get your ticket at vizcaya.org/welcome. And here is where you can see more from the Wolfson archives. You can actually browse their archives on their website, and they also have an awesome YouTube channel with more than 1,500 videos of Miami history.
If you're on our homepage, click search the catalog, and then you can search the catalog, and you can plug in Vizcaya and see how many hundreds of video segments come up. Many of which are online now, some of which are not yet online. We're working on digitizing our entire collection. Our collection includes film and video. Digitizing video is a largely mechanized process, but digitizing film requires a lot of handwork and a lot of old-time analog technology, so it takes longer, but we are working on both of those facets.
Perfect. So thank you, everybody, for being here with us, and we will see you on the next slide.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. Bye.